Hello and welcome back to the channel. So in this video we're going to do a double build of the Airfix Cromwell. So we've got a Mark IV and a Mark VI here. So starting off, the construction's a little bit different here. There's a few things to be said about this kit and the way Airfix have gone about it. First off, the way this is designed. This really shows itself to be heavily produced, I would say, if not designed in entirety by Academy, because this is kind of a unique thing to them that they've started doing. You've got it on the Panzer II, and I think the Panzer III's got this design as well, where you've got these bulkheads that have got plugs and very strong locating marks. So Airfix don't do anything like this in their tanks, and it just gives us that feeling that it looks like this one might be completely an Academy tooling from the design up. Nevertheless, the fit is very good, so it doesn't matter. Goes together extremely well, and all just slots in, as you can see. When you've got a multi-piece lower hull tub, it can be problematic sometimes, but this is certainly the best way to go about it, as it just, as you can see, it sort of locks in. A lot of this isn't being glued. Only one side's being glued in. And it all slots in very nicely. One thing to not forget, which I did, is there's a plate at the back that needs to go in at this point, and I waited some way down the line before I put it in, and it was a struggle to get it in, but that's because I didn't follow the instructions, so that's my fault. And we're just getting the front portion there of the lower hull on, and it's meant to stick out the sides there because the way the Cromwell, it's like all the cruiser tanks, they've got a kind of vacuum, I suppose. This is the bit. It's easy to miss that because it has to slot in. So just keep an eye out for that one, because I did miss it. It's that one. It's that piece, and there's a piece inside it as well. So we've got these fans going on. Grills for the intakes, and that does leave us an ejector pin mark, which is visible. So that's one we just got to get rid of. And then we go on and put the torsion bars on, which do lock in nicely, and there isn't really any variation. They are pretty much straight on from that point. And now these are the side plates. So these keep all of that suspension torsion bar in, and these are what creates that kind of, you know, vacuum area. I guess vacuum's not the right word, but it's that sandwiches it in. And I did notice there's some ejector pin marks just sort of sticking out. That was one piece, so just had to knock that back to get good fit. It's always worth a test fit for that reason. And there you go, straight in. It's usually on a model kit like this, it's meant to fit. So if it doesn't fit, there's something wrong. You just need to have a look through it and just make sure there isn't any places that don't look like they shouldn't be there. We've got the blanks going in there because this is the Mark IV that I'm building up here, and this is going to have the hedgerow cutter, and that just mounts onto those blocks, so we don't put any towing hooks like this that we've got at the back here. And that pretty much gets us to the end of the build up for the lower hull as far as the running gear and the sides to make the tub. And then we obviously go on and make the upper parts. So now it's onto the wheels, starting with the sprocket, which is very nice. It's got these kind of guards that go in the middle there, which again, as you can see, it just fits very well. This is what you're meant to get from a modern kit. It's just meant to slot together in a very logical way, and there shouldn't be any problems with fit or anything. So just something to bear in mind. If you start finding problems like that, if that's on one side and not the other, you probably haven't got it aligned or something like that. So it's always good to test fit. Now, something that's a bit unusual on these sprockets is we've got a couple of pins on the back to lock it in. We'll have a look at it a bit later when I join it up to the hull, but I actually get rid of those so we can have some movement when we put the tracks on. So just something to bear in mind. This is the idler. goes up the front. It's back to front. The sprocket's on the back of a lot of British tanks. And now we get onto the wheels. So it's entirely up to the modeler whether you want to improve it, but one of the accuracy faults in this kit is the number of bolts on the road wheels. There isn't enough. It's missing 2. And this set, at the time, was the only one around. I do believe there's now another set. This just corrects it out of the box. Gives us 8 bolts instead of the 6. Now I used the kit hubs because I didn't like the hubs in this set. They weren't very round. I know they look it there, but they are kind of a bit like handmade is the feeling. So once you took them off the resin block, it was very hard to keep them circular. Now, dealing with resin, you've got to just bear in mind there's a couple of health points. That it creates a dust, unlike plastic. It's a very fine dust that can get into your respiratory system. So it's something you need to bear in mind. So the best way to go around it first is to not sand it. You know, cut as much as you can, like I'm doing here. Cut and clip right down to where you need it to be. So you get the minimum amount of sanding. One of the best ways to keep down the dust is to do wet sandings. Just have a bit of water, dip your sanding stick in it, make the part a bit damp, sand that, and you'll find it will keep the fine dust like a paste, which actually aids the sanding a little bit. But so that's one way to go about it. But if you do have to sand, just put a dust mask on or something. It's not like fumes for painting. You just need to stop it getting into your mouth. So anything will work as long as it's a particulate filter. So once we got to that point, it's time to glue it together. And you just got to check that what I was showing in the last section was that as you move the wheels around, they match up better in certain places. So it's worth just giving them a turn and finding their sort of best side, as it were, so they match up, so they're flat to each other. Because if you go around the wrong way, you'll find that they can have a bit of a step. It's the handmade element. They're just not perfectly round. If they were sort of 3D designed, they would be exactly round, but you know, they're not. It's probably a handmade master, and then it's been cast by that. And there you go. I'm just sanding now. I have got a dust mask on, obviously out of camera, and just keeping the sanding light. You can see the dust there because I'm not wet sanding. I just go round gently. It looks like I'm sanding a lot more than I am. I'm not. I'm just trying to level them off where there's a little bit out of sync between the two rubber sections. You see the dust on my fingers. Look, that's the stuff that can be a little bit tricky. So you want to try and avoid breathing that in. Now they've been super glued onto the body, to the running gear, and leveled up with rulers. So using a steel ruler along the wheels, so slotting it in between the two wheels actually and getting down to the axles, and that's all meeting, and then placing the wheels on the flat of a metal ruler, and then you can check that they're in line as well. I'm very happy with them. It improves the model, but you know, you could argue that you wouldn't notice. So these are the pins on the sprocket here, so I'll just take those off because they slot in there. But if you take them off, you can actually move the sprocket, which is useful for when we go to put on the tracks. So you get two options for the tracks. You get rubber band tracks if you don't want to mess about with link and length, or you get link and length, which are very nice. Very difficult to get the notable sag on these cruiser and tanks. If there's anything with this running gear, it's got a very long sweep from the idler to the sprocket. And it only sort of pitches down on the middle 2 or 3 wheels, and that's not easy to get with link and length tracks, but they're okay. They're okay. I'd rather have them than not, put it like that. And if you just have individual link tracks, well, then you're shrinking your market again, because not everyone wants those. So this is the best of both worlds, and it's extremely good to have rubber band tracks in there as well, because not everyone wants to mess about with these. And I can quite understand why. So I've got a bit of tack on that metal ruler there, it's well-used double-sided tape, so it's just a bit tacky, not really sticky. So once you glue it together, just slide them off. Add them to the run, try and get them around the sprocket as best you can, pin them in and glue it. Let that glue start to go off, you don't want it to set, and then you can start to manipulate them around, and then you create the sag. And like I said earlier, I'm just sort of trying to glue them down to the middle 3 wheels, but it's very hard to get that weight. There would be a better sag coming off the sprocket and idlers there, but it's good enough for this. It's absolutely fine. So although you've seen it in the last couple of clips, now it's time to actually build up the upper hull. And this is an area which is problematic. It's a very good detail piece. This is the photo etch you get in the kit. And these are like, I don't really know what they are, like rain guards. They might even be areas where they could put stowage. But either way, they're 2 very thin strips of metal bar with holes in them. And this is given to you as photo etch. You put 1 flat piece down, and then you've got to glue the upright piece very narrowly on the end of that flat piece. Quite frankly, it's a nightmare. I've tried all sorts of things here. I'm using the VMS glue, I'm using different super glues, I'm using Bonder to try and clean it up. You just cannot get it, as you can see, you just cannot get that. It would have been much better to have had it as 1 piece and then make you do a tricky bend, which is just use your bending tool and then it's bent. To have it in 2 pieces, so you're gluing on a very tiny surface area, was just ridiculous. And this is me trying to clean it up now, and yeah, it's a very difficult area to try and clean all that up. Maybe you don't need to, but there is a lot of super glue in there to try and get it pitched down. So on the second one, I just made it out of plasticard, and it was, the previous bit of photo etch was nearly an hour. This was minutes. Cut a strip, glue it on, drill the holes, or the other way around. Absolutely no problem. So my advice would be use the photo etch as a template and just cut a little strip of plasticard and put it on. So that's much easier this time round. So as we're building up the other bit of the hull, we go out now onto the rear grille. And this slots in quite nicely. So that's another piece of photo etch. It just goes in, just trying to keep that clean, not fill up any of the holes with super glue. And now we go on to the construction of the upper hull. The way the Cromwell's been designed, I think they're future-proofing themselves, where they can give you different rear decks, because it's a bit like the Spitfire. You've got like an A, B, a C to an E wing, for instance. This is the same. You've got lower hull, the rear deck is a different makeup each time. They've got different engines and different things happening. So it's like an A, B, C, D, E, F as it goes on. And that refers to different types. I think once you start getting into Korea, they're later type decks. So this one is one of the standard decks, but it's not quite correct for all the markings, but we won't get into that. It's close enough. Most of them you can't find pictures that tell anyway, so it's just it's really only the size of doors or hinges and stuff, so I mean, you don't need to worry. If you got any doubts, chuck some stowage on the back and then you never know. So there we are, nice slot in fit there. Another little fit problem is this surround for the machine gun. It just will not meet the front plate there. No matter what you do, it will not meet all the way around, and that's because you just got to sand down the ball mount on the rear of the machine gun a little bit, so it slots in further. It's just not in far enough. It's a bit too tight. And now we go ahead and put all of the toolboxes and any of the small bits of stowage on. Really bring the hull to a finish. You can see the hedgerow cutter there as well. And no matter what kit you buy, the Mark 6 or the Mark 4, it's the same kit. So all the parts are in both kits. So just bear that in mind. You don't need to, it's only decals. That's literally the only difference. So if you want to do a 6 and all you've got is a 4, you can do that and put your own markings on it. Now, The only difference between the 6 and the 4 is the gun and the front mantlet. So this is the Mark 6, which has got the short-barreled gun, which is really quite nicely rendered. It's got some rifling in the barrel. Any joins get sort of covered up by being slotted into something, so there isn't any seam work. It's slide moulded. The machine guns are slide moulded as well. So we've got drilled out barrels, and they slot in quite nicely. Plenty of detail there. You know, you wouldn't need to add more to this unless you want to get into super detailing. It's perfectly good from the box. There's plenty of detail in this model kit, and the gun slots in quite nicely to the mantlet. As you can see, it's all very solid fits in the way that it slots in. And then we get the part that makes it move, just going into the back there so it can pivot on that. And again, all very tight fits. Works very nicely. And now we've got the 75mm gun, so this is for the Mark IV. And that goes on just as easy, as you can see, just as good. Very solid fit, that. It's not going to fall out. No glue at the minute. And that makes up the two different turrets. So you get all of that in the box, and you get more options as well. There's another gun. There's a different 75mm gun and a couple different mantlets. You just get an end to go on that muzzle brake, which I was showing, and you just sand that around. So one of the things missed is these bolts holes on this pistol port. So they do show up. They are quite obvious if you look at the main, the real tank. Again, whether you want to add these or not is entirely up to you, but they're not there, and it's easy enough to add them using what you get in the kit. Just drilling out the holes by eye, really, using a reference picture. And once you've got the holes drilled sort of deep enough, as it were, you can then move on to the next step. So the way I'm doing that is sort of doing a pilot hole with a smaller drill bit, and then bringing it up to the actual size once I've got those holes drilled, and then opening up the hole. Really, it's a shallow hole, so you don't really want to go all the way through or anything. Just want that. Then you can drop the bolt into it. Nut, sorry, it's a nut. So to get the nuts, we can get them off of the wheels that we haven't used. So I'm just slicing this in half so I can get to the nuts a bit better. And we're going to slice them off. These do have a little bit of thread showing from left over from what would be the bolt. So I've cut through that one wrong. So that's what can happen. Always happens when you're on camera. So you just nip the bolt off. Nut again. I've said it again, haven't I? And then just to pinch out that that tip, which is section of the bolt thread showing. So we've just got it down to a flush nut. Oh no, it is a bolt. I'm getting confused. It's going the other way, isn't it? But we're using a nut, so there we are. Don't know how I got confused. So there we are. So once you've got the bolts in there and the bolt head showing, it's time to move on. So we can actually build the construction of the turret. This is actually tells you to join these parts to the lower part of the turret. But there was far too much play for that, and it's a very good strong join to the top of the turret. So I decided to go the opposite way, glue them round to the top of the turret, and then mate the lower section of the turret up to that. Which worked very well. As you can see, it slots in. So they'd have you do it the other way. I don't know why. Seems a bit tricky going that way around. And then once you've got it all together, you can kind of line up, make sure the side sections are square, basically. And get the mantlet on. You can let that set up like that before gluing it, or you could glue it all around now if you wanted to. So this is the Mark 6 turret. And I've put a little bit of filler around the top. It does need that. But you can see the detail as we go around, and some of the detail we've added. So you see those bolt heads on the pistol port. Just add that touch more detail. It's a simple thing to do, but you don't have to do any of this. And then we go on to the Mark IV turret, which is the iconic Cromwell turret. And you can see there, lots of detail. This is all out the box. Very nice. You can have all of those doors open or closed. It's up to you. And the lights there, quite nice. I do add a wire to that in the end. And then I just wanted to sort out these tiny little gaps around the edges of the turret. So I'm just using some Mr. Surfacer, probably 1200, the way that's flowing, unfinned. So just painting that around until it dries. Just where there's any sort of slightly wider gaps. Once we're happy with that and it's all dried off and you filled the gaps that you want to fill, you just go over, then you can get your cotton bud and a bit of straight thinners, so cellulose thinners, which is this reacts with, and just rub it back and it will stay there in the recesses, which is exactly where I wanted it, just to act as like a little weld bead or whatever. Not worry too much, there's going to be a panel wash in there and you're not going to see it. And that completes us. So that's the start of this. This is part 1. Next week we'll be doing part 2 where we'll finish them. So this is the double build. I thought I'd go ahead and do it because I'd ordered both and I thought as they were there, well, let's do it. So they make for some impressive pictures at the end. So we've got some coming up now to show you what the completed models look like. So as always, thanks for watching. If you like what you see, let me know in the comments down below. Give the video a like. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video.